Is it correct that you used to read a book a day?
Yes. Unless it was a really big book, and it might have taken me 2 days.
War and Peace or something? Or...
I never read War and Peace, but yeah, something like that would take me a really long time.
Can we talk about why would you read a book a day and where would you find the time?
So I was in prison, and so when I had that type of appetite for reading and I had the time in solitary confinement, I read all day. That's what I did, yeah.
And I understand that you loved Anne Rice, like vampire stories or...
I loved all of Anne Rice's books about vampires, Lestat and Interview with the Vampire. And I mean, I think I read, I don't remember how many books there was at that time, but at least, I don't know, 7 or 8 books in that series that I really got into it.
But you weren't into, let's say, crime novels. You wanted an interesting, different world.
Well, you know, I read crime novels. I read some crime novels. Like, you know, my family would send me books, you know, that my dad had a buddy who would give him a bunch of books and then he would ship them to me, or my mother would ship them to me. So I would have a bunch of books to read, and it would just be a variety of different things. And then whatever guys are reading. I mean, I read everything. I really did. I read a lot of fictional stuff. I read a lot of nonfiction. I read, I don't know, self-help books. You know, there's like in prison, bringing prison up, there's like required reading in prison. It's not literally, but there's books that everybody reads in most prisons, like the 48 Laws of Power, and you know, all the books by Robert Greene, and let's see, the Code of Bushido, and The Art of War, and the Book of Five Rings by Miyamoto Musashi. Like, Eastern culture is big, so there's like a lot of those type of books that I got into. But I also, you know, my favorite book of all time is A Count of Monte Cristo, and I think maybe because it was like a revenge story, and I was really into that at that time in my life.
Right. And what's the moral of that story?
Of The Count of Monte Cristo?
Yeah.
The moral of the story? I don't... Revenge is a dish best served cold. I don't know. You know, listen, I took from that book a lot of things back then. I was an angry guy back then. I felt pretty wronged back then. And so here's a story about a guy who gets, you know, done pretty wrong, and he exacts revenge over years and years and years. It takes him to do it, but he does it. And I think at that time that was really appealing to me. You know, it's not anymore, but the book is still an incredible book.
Excellent. Yeah, 48 Laws of Power is good too. I like watching Robert Greene's videos. I don't know if everybody totally thinks that way, but I think it's a good lesson in knowing that people do think that way, and you could be offending them without knowing it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think I still remember. I can't remember if it was the first law. I think it was never outshine the master. You know, there's a lot of, but every single inmate, like, across the country that reads has probably picked up that book because they just circulate.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from that. Do you agree that reading can be transformative?
Well, yeah, in more ways than one. For example, it can be transformative in in the things that you learn from books and the knowledge that you'll have afterwards. It can be transformative mentally because you're taking yourself to a different place. I mean, it was transformative to me. Books were transformative to me in prison because I could read a book for 7, 8 hours straight, and I was in another world. I wasn't in a small little 8 by 7 foot cell. I was, you know, in New Orleans in the 1800s, you know, with these like incredible creatures, these vampires that are, you know, a different life form that have been around for millennia. And you know, I was able to take myself and put myself in a different place. Or, you know, I got into Robert Ludlum for a while, I remember, and I was reading, you know, all the Bourne books. And the original Bourne books are Vietnam era. So, or I mean, they were about the Vietnam era. Jason Bourne came from Vietnam. And so, you know, I was this special forces operative that gets out and he's doing all these cool missions and loses his memory. And so, you know, you're able to transform into a different reality. So, yeah, I think they're transformative, big time.
And then while we were setting up, speaking of reading, you said you are able to read a room. Where did that come from?
Well, it came from, you know, I don't know who I picked up the saying from, probably my writing partner. But yeah, I know how to read a room. I mean, some people don't. Some people don't know how to read a room. Some people don't pick up on cues. I'm fortunate that, you know, I think I can read a room fairly well.
Does that ever become a hindrance because, you know, they say with empaths, because you can't turn it off, you can pick up on things that you don't necessarily want to pick up on? How does that affect you?
Sure. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how, I can't really articulate how it affects me. I'm grateful that I have the ability to, you know when I might be a little too much, or understand how to approach a situation for the most part. I think that's a benefit maybe, you know?
Has it ever saved your life?
Well, not reading a room per se, but I certainly have had instincts in my life in situations, you know, long before I became a writer, got into, you know, Hollywood, that, yeah, that I listened to my instincts, sure.
How are you stuck in a mindset of misery while you were reading so many books? How does someone stay stuck like that, but you're reading these enlightening books or these transformative books?
Well, I think that human beings have an incredible ability to adapt to anything. So I remember, you know, I spent almost 9 years in prison. And of those 9 years, about 5 of which they were in solitary confinement, you know, for bad behavior. And those cells, some of those cells, this is in Illinois, are so small that when you get in, you can hold your elbow up and you can touch the wall with your other outstretched hand. And then there's a bed in there. And it's incredibly small and it's incredibly claustrophobic. And I remember the first time I got into that cell, I had a panic attack. And then they moved me into the exact same size cell, but with 2 people and a solid steel door with only little perforated holes that you couldn't see out of, but that you could get oxygen from. And this is in Menard Correctional Center in down south, Southern Illinois. My point is that I went from something that was horrible and I was panicking, and then I went into even worse situation, and I eventually just adapted to it. And taking turns, you know, the guy that's on the top bunk taking turns, who's up, who's in bed, who's going to the bathroom, who's not. I mean, these are just things that I was able to adapt to, and I think that, I mean, that's just a broader way of answering your question. I think we just adapt to anything.
Did you learn to, I guess, is it called disassociate? You go somewhere else in your mind?
Only when I read, or the times where I was fortunate enough to like have a television, watching a movie, or writing a letter. But I mean, no, I knew exactly where I was the whole time. You know, sometimes I could escape with literature, you know, but yeah.
What is solitary confinement?
So the other word for solitary confinement is disciplinary segregation. So solitary confinement is where they typically will put you in a cell by yourself. They'll take away all of your commissary items, like food items. They'll take away your television. So all that you'll have is your cosmetic items and books and paperwork, stuff that you can use to write. But and some, you know, I mentioned being in the cell with another guy. oftentimes prisons are so overpopulated that even in solitary confinement, they'll put you in a cell with another guy because there's just no capacity in the prison for all single man cells. But it's if you get in trouble in prison, you go to solitary confinement, you go to disciplinary segregation.
Now, this is something I think I heard you say on another show. I think it was Fresh Out. He has a
Okay.
YouTube channel.
Sure.
And you talked about they ask you what your religion is. What if you don't have a religion? What if you're not religious? Where do they place you, or does it matter?
No, doesn't matter. You just don't, and I can only speak on prison in Illinois. I would consider myself something of an expert, spending almost a decade there. But if you have a religion in Illinois, it goes on the back of your ID card. At least it did when I was there. And I got out in 2010, so it's been a while. But if you don't have a religion, it just doesn't go on your ID card. And different religions are entitled to different things in prisons. So, Christians or Catholics, they go to different services. Jews, Muslims, they go to different services, and etc.
And so if you don't have any type of dominant faith, or maybe even if you're born into something but you don't believe it, then you just wouldn't partake?
Yeah, I mean, it's people voluntarily say what their religion is, so there's dietary restrictions for different religions, and some people are very strict about it, and they want to be on a certain diet, and so they'll make sure that they let the officers know that, hey, this is my religion, and this, so they can get that.
Fascinating. And you said it was different in California from what you've heard?
Well, I have no idea. Look,
Okay.
I from what I've heard, sure. I mean, from the guys that I know that I've met that have been incarcerated in California, it's very different. Race, from what I understand, race kind of dominates the prison system in California. Gangs dominate the prison system in Illinois, so it's very different. I mean, even though there's plenty of gangs in California prisons, race segregates everybody. Whereas in Illinois, in the prison system there, what gang you belong to determines on kind of where you fit in.
What is life like once you get out of jail and you want to find work? What's that like?
For me, it was really tough. Well, I'll give you a little anecdote, I guess. I remember when I first got out, and I had really high hopes of, I was in great shape, and I wanted to be a personal trainer. And I remember before I got out, I was reading all of these muscle and fitness books, everything I can get my hands on. I knew all types of exercises. I, loved exercising. I loved working out. And, guys were telling me, oh, you should be a personal trainer. I said, okay. And I got out and I went to a gym, and I told this guy, it was Export Fitness in Arlington Heights outside of Chicago. And I said, I'd love to be a trainer. He says, really? He goes, oh my gosh, you'd be perfect. I go, okay, great. And he goes, yeah, just fill out an application, man, and we'll get you started. We'll pay for your certification, whatever the certification was. And I'm like, great. And I remember when I was in prison, they had told me in a class called Education for Careers to always be honest on the application, and just say, we'll explain, in the have you been convicted as a felon box? Just say, yes, we'll explain in an interview. So I did that. And I remember looking at this guy's face, and he's looking at the paper, and his eyes are scanning it, and he's smiling, and he's nodding. And then I see him see it, and he looked up at me, and he said, you're a felon. I go, yeah. He said, oh, okay. He said, what were you arrested for? I said, armed robbery. And he said, he goes, and he pointed to the cash register at the gym, and he's like, we work around cash here, and it's a corporation. And I said, buddy, no disrespect whatsoever, but it was an armed robbery for drug dealers with, that were supposed to have 2 kilos of ecstasy. I'm not going to rob you for, your petty cash in the register, you know. And he's like, you know, oh, I'm sorry, buddy. I don't think I can, you know, help you and whatever. The point is after that happened to me, I used it as an excuse to just say, screw this. You know, I might have tried a couple more times for a couple different jobs, but it really affected me in a negative way to where I'm just like, wow, I can't even get a job doing this. So screw it. Now I think there are more opportunities. Now I don't think that you have to put you're a convicted felon on an application, from what I understand. I mean, there are steps in the right direction that are being taken. But for me, yeah, it affected me in a pretty negative way, I suppose, back then.
Just out of curiosity, when you got out of prison, was it the first time and you went to look for a job, or maybe the second?
That was the first time, yeah.
Okay, the first time. So, you know, you're in your 20s at that point?
Yeah, 23.
Okay, so should be easy to find a job. And did you ever like not put on there that you had been, you know, convicted of a misdemeanor or felony?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I did. And it was for a warehouse job in Elk Grove Village. And I remember, it's crazy because I remember it was a job, they were those infomercials that sell products like books and things, and the warehouse packed those boxes up and shipped them out. So there were people putting these books and, like, I think supplements and stuff into boxes, and then it was just a whole, you know, somebody puts the stickers on them and, so, you know, and ships them out. And I remember going to apply for this job, and there was maybe 4 or 5 people applying. There was a woman who I saw checked that she was a felon, and I lied on the application, and I got the job. And I remember they told her in front of me, they were just like, oh yeah, sorry, no, we can't hire any felons here. And I was thinking, oh man, are they gonna do a background check? But they didn't. I got the job. I mean, it didn't last, but I got the job.